these samples, one has to be very careful that you are not inducing a lot of deformation into the material. Whenever I am cutting it, I am actually deforming the sample. Okay? And this deformation, all of us know that can induce certain dislocations inside the material. Right? When I roll, I have certain dislocation induced. So as a result, when I am looking at the sample inside the electron microscope, I may start possibly with an annealed sample, but I am now seeing a sample with a lot of dislocations. I really get confused. Where are these dislocations coming from? And you would know that it is actually because of your sample cutting. If you have not maintained a very slow speed and maintained very low temperatures, particularly for dislocations to not to be created, otherwise you end up in this. That is the reason why I said if I use any hacksaw or something like that and cut a sample which is, let's say, instead of 100 micron, I make a 1 millimeter thick sample or a 2 millimeter thick sample and say, sir, why can't I use my emery paper and keep on reducing the thickness by polishing it and reduce it to 100 microns? You can also do that. But in the process, you are deforming your material heavily. You are straining the material heavily, and as a result, at the end of it, if I prepare my sample or put it into the microscope, I am actually not seeing the original condition of the sample. And what I am seeing, I have to assume that this was the original condition, and this is what I was talking to you. Many a times what I actually see is what is the sample that I have prepared. It may not be the original sample. During the preparation, if I have caused certain damages, and you will see as we go along, there is a possibility of damages being caused to the sample. Particularly, this kind of damages are not of significance to you when you are talking at the optical microscopy level. But when you are talking about at the levels of electron microscope, where you want to see very fine details. For example, I want to see the difference between an annealed sample and a heavily deformed sample, let us say. My goal is to see dislocations. If my sample preparation technique itself is introducing dislocations, then I do not know whether the sample that I have taken, which is an annealed sample, after seeing the sample you say, no, you have not given me an annealed sample, you have only given me a deformed sample. That fellow will say, no bhai, I have done significant annealing of this sample. But your sample actually shows a lot of dislocations. This is exactly what I have faced when I was working with Tata Steel people. There was a lady who used to come to our IIT Madras to do a lot of microscopy, electron microscopy, TEM. And she used to prepare her samples there and bring it here and put it into our TEM and we used to see it. Every time I used to put a sample in, we used to see a lot of dislocations. I used to say, what is happening to your sample? Why is it such a heavily deformed? She said, no, sir, my samples are all annealed samples. Your microscope is bad. So I used to say, microscope is like garbage in, garbage out. What you put in is only what you see. So it does not create anything. TEM cannot create dislocations inside your sample. So then I asked her exactly how you prepare the sample. That is when I realized that their cutting machine cannot prepare any thick sample less than 500 microns. 0.5 millimeter is the smallest thickness that they can get. And from that 0.5 millimeter, they do a polishing on a belt grinder and to bring it to around 100 microns. And obviously, you introduce a lot of defects. So these are the things one has to be very careful. So now we have this thickness, and from that thickness, how do we go to this thickness is what is our goal. And if it is a metallic sample, we have a way to do it. This is what we call it as jet polishing. The principle that we use is simply that if I take any sample and immerse into a acid medium, it dissolves. Anodic dissolution, all of you are aware of. This is what is the principle of even corrosion. But what we do is we try to selectively dissolve the sample. So what I do is I take a sample and long back, olden days when this kind of jet polishers are not available, what people used to do is if I look at this is, let's say, thickness direction. If I look at the other direction, from this direction, let's say, if this is my sample surface, and this sample surface, what I do is I apply certain non-conducting paint on this let's say nail polish for example. Nail polish is non-conducting. I apply nail polish everywhere excepting a small region. Okay, I only allow a small region to be opened up. Rest is all I just paint it and put it into electrolyte, which is basically nothing but an acid solution. Depending on the type of metal that we use, we have different solutions. Like even for an optical microscopy, you have different etchants for different alloys, right? Nitrile we use for steels. For aluminum alloys, we use Keller's reagent or something like that. So we have different agents for different alloys. Similarly, I can use different solution and then dip this into that. And when I dip it into this, what you will see is that only this region starts getting dissolved. Rest of the region does not get dissolved. And as a result, I am able to dissolve selectively a small region. And when it starts dissolving, let's say it is this region which is exposed, and it starts dissolving slowly. And at some region, you will see that this two sides, when it is dissolving, you will see a small hole is formed here. When you just hold it vertically into that liquid, you will see that from both sides the dissolution starts happening. And as the dissolution progresses, at the center, a small hole is formed. And if you look at that region where the hole is, if this is my sample, and if this is the region where the hole has formed, it is almost like your tensile sample. If you have ever seen a sample that is prepared for tensile testing, okay, they prepare samples like this. So it is this region, if I concentrate in my microscope, I will see that the thickness in this region will be of the order of this, because it is just everything got thinned, and this is happening continuously, and at some stage the moment the hole is formed, you can. But the problem is, how do I stop immediately after the hole is formed? This is a major challenge. So you need to be able to be very careful to catch it when just the hole has formed. Otherwise, it starts continuing to dissolve, and you may see that the dissolution continues and it becomes like this. So it becomes a blunt hole. If it becomes a blunt hole, then this thickness is still again larger. It will not be like this. It will be much bigger than that. So it's of no use to me. So I need to catch it. And that's why now these are the new techniques that are available are what are called jet polishing techniques, where I put this into a container and allow this electrolyte to fall on the sample like a jet using a motor, like a water pumps. Okay, so you can use a pump which pumps this liquid in the form of a jet from both the sides. That's why we call it as a twin jet polisher, where I make my sample as positive anode and I make this container as cathode. So anode dissolves, right? All of you know this. So once I do this, then it starts dissolving. And I also put a light somewhere here and a photovoltaic cell here. The reason is, the moment a hole is formed, immediately the photocell detects this light, because light is trying to pass through. And as long as there is no hole, the photocell does not detect it. The moment there is a hole, immediately the light is detected by photocell and it cuts off the circuit. So there is no more dissolution that takes place. So you can stop this dissolution as soon as one small hole is formed, and then you will be able to see this. And then you can be able to see the sample. But all this is possible only under one condition. What is the condition that is required for doing this such kind of a electro polishing or a jet polishing? Yeah, selective dissolution. Anything more? There has to be a certain property of your sample. Sample should be non-conducting. Sample should be conducting. If the sample is not conducting, there is no anodic dissolution. Electropolishing is based on a principle that your sample you can make it into an anode, and your container you can make it in electrolyte, you can make it into a cathode, and the circuit has to be completed. When will the circuit get completed? Only when your sample is conducting. And if your sample is not metallic, let us say I have a polymer, I want to see it in a TEM. It's a non-conducting polymer. Or I have a ceramic, I want to see a ceramic in a TEM. So how do I see them? So there are so many ceramics people work on, and I want to see them also. So how do I see? that is when you need to use something else. So if it is non-conducting, at the same time my problem is I need to come to this thickness. There is no solution for me. So to reach that thickness, how do I do it? So that's where what we do is we have again certain techniques that are available. One such technique is what is called ion milling. Again here also, first thing that we do is we make a sample which is thin, of the order of 100 microns. You may say, how do I make such a thin thing in an abrasive in a ceramic material? Ceramic materials are very brittle. Okay, so slicing a ceramic material is not easy. So the only way to make a ceramic material into such thin is if you can somehow polish a ceramic material without it breaking it. So that's why handling ceramic materials is not very easy in a TEM. So you have to have somehow a way by which there are special techniques that are available which can cut, particularly certain diamond tools are used where even a brittle material can be cut into very thin slices. So once you make a thin slice like this, similar to your metallic sample, that is when the whole story starts, and you do not use a jet polishing, but you use what is called ion milling. What we do is we keep this sample, a thin sample like this, into a chamber and fill it with argon and evacuate and fill it with argon, ionize this argon gas and allow these ions to fall on the sample like a beam from both the directions. And we call this as ion milling because you are milling. Milling is a term. Where do we use this milling? In manufacturing. You must have heard of milling. Milling is actually close to actually drilling. Taking the material out is what is milling. So this particular thing we do by bombarding ion beam onto the sample so that the atom by atom are removed, sputtered away. Obviously, because this is happening atom by atom, it is a very slow process. For example, a sample from 100 microns to go to 100 nanometers might take about 24 hours. Whereas jet polishing is just about a 2 minutes or a 3 minutes job. But in jet polishing also, one has to be careful in identifying certain parameters. For example, whenever you are talking of electro polishing, there are certain parameters that are important. One is what is the voltage that you are using, and what is the solution concentration that I am using. Third is what is the temperature that I am using. Whenever you are talking about electro polishing, there is a certain IV characteristics that we talk about. Have you ever seen something like this? If you have gone through any practical course on physical metallurgy, people would have talked about this. This part is called what? Yes? It is called etching. This is called polishing. And this is called pitting. And if you are in the polishing domain, even if you are varying the voltage, the current does not change. And that is the best domain where you should actually do your electro polishing. And this domain is different for different materials. You need to identify what is that domain for your material. For every material, one has to identify what is this domain and work only in that domain. Otherwise, if you are either here or here, the sample will have a lot of oxidation inside happening, and as a result, you will not be able to see the true image of the sample. So this domain has to be identified. And also, if the temperature is higher, then the material has a tendency to dissolve very fast. As a result, you are not able to catch that particular instant where just a hole has formed. So as a result, many of times we do this jet polishing at temperatures which are below the 0 degrees. So most of the cases, for example, if I am making an aluminum copper alloy, generally we use about minus 30 degrees centigrade. So you cool the whole electrolyte to very low temperatures using electronitrogen or something, and then keep the electrolyte at low temperature and then allow it to circulate and then fall as a twin jet onto the sample and do the whole thing. And also what is also important is what concentration you are using for different solutions. For example, for aluminum alloys, the best solution that is used is HNO3, 20% HNO3 in methanol. Instead of 20, if I use 30 or 40, obviously the acid concentration I am increasing. So the dissolution is faster, and that will influence the whole process. So you need to identify the best solution concentration, you need to identify the best temperature, you need to identify the best voltage conditions. All these three are crucial if you are doing jet polishing. Similarly, when you are doing iron milling also, the conditions have to be carefully maintained, the gun current that we are using and the voltages that we are using, and the angle at which the beam is falling is also very important. If the angle at which the beam is falling is completely vertical, then what you get is almost like a drilling. It's like a drilling. We do not want to drill a hole. Please remember, our goal is not to drill a hole. Our goal is to thin the sample. I am starting with 100 microns. I want at least in some region the thickness to come from 100 microns to 100 nanometers. So our goal is not to make a hole. Okay? If I want to simply make a hole, take a drill bit and then drill the sample. That is not our interest. So we want to thin it. So that means if the beam is falling at a glancing angle, then it just forms this kind of what is called, and at the same time the sample is also rotating. You actually do this. You keep the sample horizontal and allow the beam to fall at an angle and keep rotating the sample around this particular axis so that the sample is being dissolved or being sputtered away atom by atom, and in the process you see the sample starts from both sides becoming like this, and finally at some stage there will be a hole formed. Again a similar principle, that the hole is detected by a photocell and the machine is allowed to stop. And in order to make this faster, people also do something, an intermediate step, what is called dimpling. Because as I told you, from 100 microns to come to 100 nanometers will take a long time by iron milling. So can I reduce the thickness further? So for that what we do is, we take the 100 micron thick sample, ceramic sample, put what is called a grinding wheel on surface which is rotating like this, and apply some load on it. And when you do this, what happens? This grinding wheel tries to remove the sample, right? So it forms a kind of a dent on that, on the surface. And if after it forms a certain dent, if I can invert the sample, again do it on the second side, you will see again on the other side also you will form a dent. So that you are not interested here to make the hole, but simply interested to reduce the thickness like this, so that now your sample is something like this. So from 100 microns, you have brought it down to around 10 microns. And now you put this into an iron mill, so that the amount of material that you need to remove is smaller. And this, we call it as dimpling, because this is like a dimple on the cheek. So the term dimpling is used, and we call that machine as a dimpler. Okay? So such process is also used. So before iron mill, we have to do dimpling, so that, but in all this process, you are seeing you are grinding the sample. So there is a possibility of certain deformation. But luckily, ceramics do not get deformed easily. It's not, you don't create dislocations in ceramics, because ceramics are very high melting metals. So there is no plastic deformation in ceramics much. Ceramics are all brittle, right? So there is no plastic deformation. So as a result, that problem may not be there in ceramics like this. The second aspect that you also need to know is not only the thickness, the diameter of the sample is also very important. In a TEM, the biggest sample that can go into the TEM is only 3 millimeters. Imagine what we are actually seeing. I am seeing a sample which is 3 millimeters. Can you imagine 3 millimeters? Okay. So 3 millimeters disc with a thickness of 100 microns starting and finally finishing with 100 nanometers is what actually I am seeing in TEM. So I am not seeing a big plate like this. I am actually seeing a small speck out of this plate. Let's say I have a rolled plate and I am taking only a speck out of. How do I take that 3 millimeter disc? What I do is, for example, if I have a sheet like this formed by slicing a sample, and in this sheet I can use a punching machine. In metallic samples I can use a punching machine to punch. If you have ever seen papers being punched, a similar punch can be used to punch a 3 millimeter disc. And this 3 millimeter disc is allowed to go through a jet polishing, finally to end up into this. So now in that 3 millimeter disc sample, which is a 100 micron sample, you see the center will be the one where the hole is formed. So this is 100 microns, but here you will see a thickness which may be of the order of 100 nanometers. And similarly, how do I get such a punch in a ceramic sample? I cannot punch a ceramic sample. Ceramics are brittle. If I punch them, they will break into pieces. So there is a special technique again there, what we call it as ultrasonic disc cutting. Have you ever seen a boring machine? Okay. So similar to boring machine, if you have a plate of this one, what is called a ceramic material, and you can use a boring machine with a diamond tool. It's a cylindrical boring machine, which we call it as ultrasonic disc cutter. So it just, by ultrasonic vibrations, it just penetrates through the sample and keeps on rotating so that it just scoops out a 3 millimeter disc out of it, because the diameter here is 3 millimeter. And already I have sliced my sample and maintained this thickness as 100 microns. So now what I have a sample which is a 3 millimeter round pellet with a thickness of 100 microns. And then I start from there and do dimpling and then ion milling, and finally the sample is ready. You can see how much of struggle that we need to go through. Okay. So after all this struggle, we put the sample into the TEM, and let's see what do we see in the TEM. As long as I was working on the TEM during my PhD, I felt this is the toughest life I have gone through so far. And then I went once to Japan. I was there for 2 years in Japan, working on a new technique called atom probe tomography, where what we do is we make a sample in the form of a needle with a diameter of the order of around, let's say about 10 microns, and a needle like this, a tapered needle like this, and the tip will have a diameter of the order of around 100 nanometers. This is a very tough job. And after you do that, put it into the machine, after a while the tip breaks. So again you take it out, again you polish it, again you put it. I had to at least prepare some 50 samples before I actually get some meaningful data. So life with microscopy is not easy. That's why many people do not become microscopists. But then it's very fascinating field. Okay. So anyway, we will try to see some of those fascinating things in the next class when we try to see some of the images. Okay, now let's look at, can it? Okay, we'll stop now and